So in 2020, for the first time ever, we had a night AFL grand final. Some people hated it, some people liked it, some people were completely against it even going into it, even before it even started. For me personally, going into it, I was unsure how I felt about it. I've always loved the tradition of the day grand final. It's what I've always known the grand final to be, as we all have. But I was curious to see what this night grand final would serve up, what it would be like, and whether it would be able to convince me otherwise. So we started off the game with the pre-game entertainment, which, let's be honest, it absolutely sucked. Now, I'm not going to criticize the AFL so much for the acts that they chose, because look, it's 2020, you're pretty limited in what you actually have to choose from. So they probably got the best they could. But I am going to criticize the actual bands themselves, not because their performances were necessarily bad, but just because of the choice of songs they chose to perform. If you're playing the pre-game and the build-up to one of the biggest games on the Australian sporting calendar, it's not a time to play your slow ballads and your love songs about a girl who dumped you and now you're upset about it. It's time to fire up the audience and get them ready to go and get them pumped for a big game. So having ballad after ballad after ballad was just, it was depressing at best. So after the Ball Fest that was those first few acts, they finished up with Wolfmother playing the only song they were ever going to play. And I reckon someone probably told them before they went on to, fire up the crowd, play something that's going to get people on their feet and moving in their seats. Now, I don't know if they necessarily succeeded at that goal, but their light show definitely succeeded in making the epileptics move in their seats. Seriously, just a note to all bands anywhere performing a show, the constant flashing lights in your face are just annoying. Stop doing that. So with the pre-game entertainment out the way, we move on to the actual game itself. And for me personally, the whole first half, I kind of felt like I didn't love the nighttime grand final and I was missing the traditional afternoon time slot. It didn't really feel like a grand final to me. And look, that was always going to be partially the case because it was at the Gabba and, it wasn't at the traditional MCG setting. So that was always going to be part of it. But the nighttime feel just didn't feel like a grand final. To be honest, it kind of felt like a grand final of a NAB Cup, but with like a lot more hype and attention drawn to it. So we finished the first half, got into the halftime entertainment, the halftime show. Honestly, I thought Shepherd put on a pretty good show. I think they performed songs that people would know more or less, stuff you hear on the radio, and songs that would get people up and moving and dancing and, having a bit of fun. That's what these kind of halftime and pre-game shows are all about. Now, I can understand if, look, this may not be your type of music. So if you didn't like the halftime show because it's not your kind of music, that's okay. But I think if we're all being honest, we have to kind of admit that that was, as far as a visual spectacle and a show goes, that was the best halftime show we've ever had in terms of just, a spectacle, right? I mean, think back to previous grand finals. How could you go back to, just having a band on stage performing in broad daylight with no lights, no effects, nothing like that? You couldn't go back to that after this, surely. Imagine those halftime shows that people loved, like, the likes of The Killers or Lionel Richie or whoever it was. Imagine those with this whole kind of light show and spectacle that, they had at this year's grand final. I thought the halftime show was a resounding success. And honestly, how impressive the halftime show was kind of turned me around a bit on the whole idea of a night grand final. I enjoyed the second half a little bit more as a grand final. It felt like a grand final. It felt like this idea of the night grand final, maybe it had potential. So I think for me, moving forward in 2021 and beyond, personally, my preference would be to have a twilight grand final. At the MCG, of course. Look, I'm a Perth footy fan, I'm a Freo fan. I hate the idea of the Vic bias and, the old VFL still being around and all those kind of things. I don't think you can mess with the tradition of the MCG. 1 year at the Gabba, it just felt wrong. The idea of a twilight grand final at the MCG, I think could be pretty good. If you could time it in a way so at least the first quarter is kind of played in the afternoon sun, you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get that kind of traditional afternoon grand final feel in the first quarter and at the start of the game, and then you go into halftime, you get the spectacle of the halftime show with the lights and in darkness with the light shows like we had at the Gabba this year, and then you get the second half played under lights, which was fine, I think. And I think as well, from a time perspective, what time it starts, I think it's better because you're not having to wait, especially for the Victorian people, you're not having to wait as long, you're not having to wait the entire day for the grand final to get started. It's probably a good 3 or so hours earlier than it started this year. Still a couple of hours behind when it would normally start, but it's less of a wait. Now, if you're one of those people who criticized and complained and said they hated the night grand final because the afternoon 2:30 start is the perfect time for them to get their drink on and start the drink sessions. I think regardless of what time the game starts, whether it's afternoon, evening, or at night, I think you'll be fine with your drinking sessions, right? I think your drinking problem will see you through no matter what time it is. But other than that, I think the twilight time is a perfect time. You get that bit of a tradition with the game starting in, sunshine and in the afternoon, but then you get the spectacle of the halftime show, which I think is a good idea. It definitely felt like with this year's halftime show, it was the AFL meeting up with the rest of the sporting landscape, right? The NFL with the Super Bowl put on really impressive shows. That's what the AFL have kind of always tried to do, but never really been able to. And I think this year it felt like it was kind of, in that respect, it was a coming of age for them in terms of their halftime shows. Now, granted, the whole grand final isn't about the halftime entertainment, but it is a part of it. And like I said, Twilight Grand Final, I think, gives you the best of both worlds. So guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Did you like the Night Grand Final? Would you prefer a Twilight, or do you just want back to the daytime tradition? What is your preference, and what do you think the AFL will do? Do you think they'll stick with the Night Grand Final? Do you think they'll go back? Do you think they'll listen to the fans at all, or do you think they'll just follow on with how the TV ratings and the money went? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But until next time, guys, I'll see you later.